All right, guys. We're going at it again because I have another idea that basically takes apart the 10-day break I went on by just doing two videos on the same day for some reason. But we're gonna go over something that I've been thinking about the week since, and that was the difference. Actually, a couple days at least since now, but the difference between qualifications and manipulation. There is a politics YouTuber that has a very keen grasp of what he has followed through with the Ancapistan ways of being an anarcho-capitalist. And I'm personally an anarchist or agorist myself, more on non-Marxist YouTube, but that's why I don't talk about it as much on this channel because I focus claymation and false on this channel, but I don't hide everything about myself on the internet. But the things I keep sacred or even don't have to talk about at all, from that own merit, whether it's my choice or not, is its own thing. But I am an anarchist, so it's like a, at least to the extent I am, but it's like a, but this person who I will name for the sake of genuine disclosure, my 2 cents. So my 2 cents talks about the law of manifestation. For some reason, because someone asks about him, like, what are your thoughts on the law of attraction, law of vibration? They word for word they say, my 2 cents. What are your thoughts on the law of attraction and manifestation and all that? It's like, so this is someone who is a politics YouTuber. He's not really in the spiritual enlightenment and the conscious community. He's more of a uh, render the state irrelevant, avoid paying for insurance or taxes, don't wave to the police because that's bullshit kind of thing. Where it's like and he does this in tandem with his own beliefs. Don't take what anyone says with a grain of salt, including me. But this is again someone who just believes in more of the ideologies and the logicians' ways of how we do these things. All of us are like this. We all have our own ways of using logic and emotion and how we see the world. The perspective is different for anyone, whether they see objective sentiments in what's fixated or not. And so my 2 cents sees this question about manifestation. He's like, I don't really have anything to say from my own experiences. He doesn't have. He explains for most that he has not understood um, anything like this before because he doesn't delve into spiritual stuff. He's more of a Christian religious person because I think he has a wife and he's a bit more Christian himself to an extent, Catholic, I guess. But then he literally says word for word, I will tell you this much. The reason that manifestation cannot work is because you would only result in the things that are already going to come to being. They're not going to already just be there just because you think them into existence. It's like that's not literally what he says, but it's something like that where it's like his way of debunking manifestation is to say that it's like a thing where you don't have to worry about what's not there. Even some spiritual people like Yash from Beyond the Alchemy say that attraction isn't necessary. You might as things are some things in this life, if not everything, is destined into being because you wouldn't have to attract it if it was meant for you anyways. Which is it's a nice perspective of his own. That's Yash, not my 2 cents. But it's like sense being that like my 2 cents saying that. And I love this guy for a lot of his own arguments. I used some of his clips for YouTube Shorts on my channel and other content I made on my other alts. But it's like I reviewed his channel. I even reviewed some of his other content. But I need some of his clips on audio, but that's for another video. Again, Sense is being a bit disingenuous with this, because for starters, he just says he doesn't know what the spiritual conscious community is like, and for another thing, he delves into manifestation as if he knows what he's talking about, but he already knows that he hasn't delved into it before himself, and so when he says that with his own experience, relevant to the core, relevant experience is important, guys. Uh, it's it's disingenuous because again he's not delved into it himself to know any different, but he uses his own political and logician experience to explain the spiritual, and it's like it's a hard scope of how this works because even when you get into other stuff like the science of manifestation and like the science of astrology and all that, uh, that very much can be a bit of a hard debunk or not so much. But what I'm getting at here is, which is going to be relevant to qualifications and manipulation in a second, but like uh, you shouldn't really have to talk on something that you don't know anything about to an extent. Like, these things are funny because I have a bit of a pet peeve with qualifications and a little bit of a pro-sided edginess with manipulation. We'll get into that very soon. When my 2 cents this debunks manifestation, is he saying this to have something to say for the question that was asked on the spot, or is it because he has a bit of a I don't want to make this sound personal, but it's like because I love this guy, but it's like he's an outstanding logician at his own merit. But it's like he's generally a very pleasant person. But it's like, even if other things considered, it's just this man can't really grasp something that is outside of his field using what's within his field. Like, it's like that's like it's as if like it's as if you like get like David Palmer talking about politics, and this is where it gets funny too, is because David Palmer talks about politics quite a bit too, but like because David will at least talk about the things that he can scope himself. And to me, as an anarchist, it sounds funny from my perspective, because like, well, David only knows about some of the mainstream stuff and some of the other stuff and some of the really cool stuff, but it's like, but he doesn't know everything because it's not within his field so much. He's interested, like David's interested in politics, but it's not like a thing where he can just grasp it as closely as maybe even my 2 cents can. But then you have what I just said with my 2 cents grasping spirituality in a certain aspect, where it's like, okay, maybe his views are very obscured, and he's talking about something he hasn't experienced before, in his own words, explaining why it's not real. And it's like, not that I don't want to believe him, because that can be my own gripe, but it's like, it's weird. It's like, that's when qualifications start to matter, is that people want you to be competent enough to know what you're talking about, especially when the perspective is so important. But they're not supposed to be concrete to that extent. There are some things that will be factual and guaranteed, but you have to meet them to them yet first. And so it's like, that's the thing that backs up qualifications. Something that goes against qualifications, however, is when you prevent anything and everyone from having anything to say about anything. And that's why I'm grateful at my 2 cents I said something. Because that idea of, I won't prevent this person from committing suicide because it will make things worse, which I understood that a little bit to my own guys. For a while I did. Or even compared to, I will do anything to prevent this person from committing suicide. And it's like, that the reason that's relevant to me is like, it's this aspect where we make excuses for why we don't do something or why we have to do something, and it could be completely different from the communication of what would have been there. It's a good enough of a universal advice to just ask, or to simply just ask questions, which sometimes can be wicked in its own way, unfortunately. Depends on the situation, but it's like, you want to be someone who does not prevent everyone from having something to say. That doesn't even reply as free speech. It's more like, it's literally like, just the answer to the hatred is to be free. And it always was like that. Even in terms of like, do we allow fighting in schools, or do we allow violence in movies and video games, or do we allow pornography in the industry? All this stuff is sort of make compunctured and shit. It's like, sometimes maybe the taboos had their own element of truth, but even then the freedom is what matters, really, to each their own. But it's like there's a lot of controversy with even what I just said, if I even believe it. But just so qualifications can be bullshit. In my opinion, they already are bullshit. Like, qualifications, I said in the previous video, the problem with qualifications is that if you rely on someone having the college degree, or the sentiment of their research, or backing up everything they say factually and guaranteed with evidence, then you have nothing else to say. It's like when you say, oh, your friends are super good, the more you talk to them, the more you won't do anything. Yep, yes, absolutely, but at least let them talk in the first place. God damn it. It's just, And then the qualifications are funny, because if you need someone to say something or do something in order to prove it, how did you know how to believe them? You know what I mean? Maybe. So qualifications have their pros and cons. What about manipulation? I made a video about like narcissism and gratitude one time. That was for a long ass hour, like 55 minutes. And then manipulation is obviously bad to an extent. Because it is something that happens in a lot of relationships, romantic or otherwise, where people get thrown out of balance because people aren't honest with each other, and they don't communicate, obviously, because that's a cliche for a reason. It really is. It's a stereotype for a reason. And then you have people who actually will go out of their way to never change or improve, because it's not only because it's hard, but because it's not even something that they want. And that's when they should ask themselves from the inner world again, but compare everything else. But manipulation is seen as a bad thing because it causes a lot of problems in the world as we know it. Contextually, the way that manipulation can be good is how you use it in a good way. When it's not necessarily because, long story short, the answer to do the ends justify the means is yes. Someone I just subscribed to someone, C.B. Johnson. He's a great philosopher and logician himself, compared to even both people like all the spiritual and conscious community people and all the logicians and other political creators and whatever. And even the manospheres, some people like, or even just relationship and social dynamic people in general, like Base Fuzz, Zarius. I keep talking about him a little bit. I don't even mention, there was many of his clips on my videos for montages, but manipulation, if you use it in a manner where you can encourage someone for the positive reasons, then manipulation in that case is not bad. There's a scene in Shankers 9 or Tim Burton's 9, however you call this movie, the animated movie with the Stitch Punks, and there was someone who said in the commentary that what 9 did for 5 was a manipulation, but it was positive manipulation. It's when you use it, and this is not bullshit. This is if you use it in a way where you encourage someone to help you because their motivations line up with yours in a way that didn't seem relevant, but it was still meaningful to them. If it lines up with their virtues and principles that way, that's not bad. It's manipulation that doesn't have to be there, but it's creative, and it is very. It can be a good thing if you use it properly. But it's a very chaotic and abstract principle of that nature of that. It's like the manipulation that is seen as bad or even is bad is when you use it for no other bad means than to get something selfishly or to not do anything bad with the situation, for even other malicious intents, or not even with that even. It's not only bad. And qualifications are not only good. So the difference between qualification and manipulation goes as follows. Plan a little bit if you want to. Plan if you need to. Make plans and strategies at first so that you have a guide and a goal. Have an end goal and then have a means to get there, and then get started working on it. Like just do something. Anything. It does not matter what you do. Even anything you do will teach you something. And how is this relevant to qualifications and manipulation? When we procrastinate on either the villainy or the nihilism of things, do we want to have to know that what we have foremost has to exist for real as a qualification? Do we have to know what we're doing is wrong, as if morality doesn't have to mean anything in our lives because we're workaholics? There's a lot that goes into this shit. I used to complain about a lot of people being apathetic and nihilistic, and I would always say things like, oh, I have to look into like art, animation, or fictional series and shows to find actual emotion and context. And it was funny, long story. You don't need to qualify every single thing you do or do not do or need to understand about the world, because we always change. We always become different people for the better if we choose to. And we can always be better than most people anyways if we just try to elevate ourselves in the best way without comparing ourselves to them. A little mouthful quickly there. You don't need to qualify everything. You don't need to construe everything as being narcissism or ego death or, oh, this was not gonna work anyways if it was gonna be this bad, which to an extent works for most. It works, to be fair, that works for some other situations. That's good advice if you use it properly, again. So, but most people, the way we already add to the most people we see already, who we think of as being misconstrued and not worthwhile, you might as well not be with them for sure. But think of it in terms of like, when you see anyone, including yourself, as being someone off thwarted, because one of the weirdest things is trying to call out a problem when it's still sober. Like, you ever hear like comedians who bring light to dark things, because that's how dark their lives were. It's like comedians and artists, they have it really hard. If they're trying to be positive already, if you have a funny monkey or a freaking artist who makes the best even like dark subjects like death and suicide, they're not trying to do that because they don't know any better, as if they're ignorant. It's because they know what those things are like. They know what depression's like. So they've been there. That's probably why they go on the opposite extreme. It sometimes can be too extreme, like Robin Williams, for example. having all the resources he had, and he still had to commit suicide. And it's like that's one of the hardest controversies about it, is that Robin probably could have survived even in his old age, and he just couldn't make it. But it's like I'm not blaming him for that, but it's like that's one of the controversies, that he could have probably made it if he just found a way. But there usually, if not always, is a way to survive darkness like that. But even in his old age, he could have made something like that work. But another video. So it's just the case that you genuinely don't need to worry about knowing something for sure for qualifications and knowing that something is inherently bad for manipulation. The difference, once more, if I even said all this whole video, is that qualifications only hold you back if you use them as a front excuse to prevent someone from being real with their own value inherent offerings. Because there's always a way someone can help you, no matter how little they may seem, or even irrelevant. You don't know this from an insightful perspective the way I do, and I take that shit for granted. Like I don't just tell you this arrogantly because I don't know any better. I feel bad that there are things that I can't even explain from hermetizing in my house, in my room all day, and then not knowing how that was actually helping, because I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm contributing something energetically or even otherwise. There's a lot that I do without realizing it, and that's something that I also take for granted. It's like, so I could be in my own horse all the time, but at least I don't have to hide it behind a qualification. And then usually manipulation is not bad if you use it properly, but you don't want to be misconstruing and misconceiving everybody with a malicious or pointless intent. And pointless being all the other workaholic stuff, World only cares about results. Oh, you're an evil villain. You know how this morality and productivity thing gets hand in hand? Is because if people think morality is pointless, and they also think that working is not going to help you understand the good and the light, they're both important. Don't play with me. They're both important. Like emotions and logic and like action and planning. It's like they're all important. It's how you use them. Qualifications and manipulation are similar in the sense that they both give you a guise to measure yourself, like how you do dopamine detoxes. If somebody avoid the internet or your devices a lot of times, if not very conditionally, and you realize that some of you don't even want to keep doing that, you just want to avoid it minimally, or even just be more conscious of what you're doing, which is one of the best things to learn from dopamine detox, even if you don't avoid your devices for too long in the long run. Or you're not avoiding video games as much, or you're not avoiding Netflix as much, but is to learn how to be conscious with your own choices and your checking your own vibration. When you can make sure that what you're doing has an element of truth, and trusting your own path, knowing that your own intentions are what they are, and not caring about what people think of them, you'll be okay. This is how a lot of the truth works, by the way. It's like, I watched the anime Angel of Death last weekend, and freaking Isaac Foster and Rachel Gardner. Jesus Christ. I love that anime, like that 60 episode anime from 2018, based on a 2016 game or 2012 game from the RPG Maker. I keep obsessing about Gemini Woman for some reason. I can't. Bless my blonde-eyed, yellow blonde-haired, loving heart. Okay, but enough of that. But it's like but the idea being that when we get in our own heads about what's necessary, what's not, we can often hold some of ourselves back. But you're gonna want to know that innermost trust in yourself and what you're really doing is all that really matters. You can't be sure about everything you're doing being factual or opinionated or emotional or logical. You can trust yourself foremost, no matter what. It may look like what you're doing is bad. You can check yourself all the time. You can check yourself, what did I do wrong, or what can I do better, or I will do better, rather than apologize. And there's differences in those. You can always apologize for things that that have their own inherent meaning for that. But the better thing to do, in my opinion, is to both forgive yourself and to do better. And then if you see it, that you can find a way that maybe something wasn't manipulative or necessarily needing qualifications, having the qualifications that it needed, but having the understanding that it wasn't manipulative. You understand that those differences between qualifications and manipulation are there for a reason. They're not always the same, and they don't even seem like a paradox, as if that's the point, as if that actually makes sense. Trust yourself no matter what it looks like you're doing. Because what you have at the end of the day is yourself. No matter where you go in this world, you always have yourself to understand and follow through with all the time. Love yourself.